Cumberland traffic, totaling 4041 uniform, departing 11 right on time.
Nothing. There was nothing there to land on. If you landed there, if you survived it, they would have to helicopter you and the pieces of your glider out because there's no way.
Yeah, if they find you.
Yeah.
I'm just grateful my wife will never listen to this podcast.
This is Soaring the Sky, a glider pilot's podcast, coming to you from the Mid-Atlantic region here in the United States and bringing you great soaring content from glider pilots all over the globe. We now join Chuck and our guest pilot.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. So happy you're joining us today. This episode is going to be so much fun. Our guest host today, Clemens Chipek from Chest in the Air, is joining us from Colorado. Now, he will be talking with Bruno, Vassel, and Dan Wrobel in Utah about their recent soaring safari they completed. You may have followed some of their journey on Facebook. Now, their adventure included 5 states and approximately 1,800 miles with a ground crew and a refurbished glider winch from the 1960s. Now, they're going to take us through each leg of this journey, giving us all the details and share their experiences along the way, from rope breaks to landing out in a farmer's field while cattle surrounded one of the gliders with a bull standing guard nearby. They tackled some of the highest mountains in the United States, flying over some of the most beautiful areas in the world. I hope you stick around after hearing their story because our friend Sergio, he's back, the Soaring Master, with another great segment, and this one is about final glides. All of that now on episode 123.
All right, so welcome everyone. We have 2 very special guests today on the Soaring the Sky podcast, and you also have a guest host, Clemens from Chest in the Air. I'm standing in for Chuck Fulton, your regular host. And I'm excited about the 2 guests that we have. We have Bruno Vassel IV, that I think is somebody who's very familiar to the listeners on this podcast, and also from Bruno's famous YouTube videos. As you know, Bruno is the most prolific YouTube producer out there in the soaring community. So welcome back, Bruno.
Hi, Clemens. Great to be here.
Awesome. And then together with Bruno, we have Dan Wrobel. And Dan, I understand, also flies in Utah, but I'll let Dan introduce himself, and then we will get into why the 2 of them are together on this podcast. So, Dan, can you introduce yourself?
I can. I'm Dan Wrobel. I've been flying in Utah for about 20 years now. I've had my Ventus for almost 15 years. Had a lot of fun with it, and known Bruno for pretty much all of those 15 years at least, maybe even 20 years. Utah is a great place to fly, and we wanted to go fly more in Utah and some of the surrounding states, so that's what this is about.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, you have a Ventus. That's great. I fly a Ventus too, so that's awesome. All right, so let's get straight into why we have both of you on this podcast. The 2 of you completed recently a very cool soaring safari that took you some very spectacular areas in, I understand, I think in 5 states in the western U.S., Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, Arizona. But before we get into the trip, what, for the listeners who don't know what that is, what is a soaring safari?
Yeah, that's a great question. What is a soaring safari? We'd never done one before. So, let's just start at the beginning of this thing. 7+ years ago, our club, the Utah Soaring Association, was crazy enough to agree to let's refurbish an old 1960s glider winch. And we then, over a period of about a year, Dan and myself, we each have hundreds of hours in this process. We refurbished this glider winch. And what a glider winch is it allows you to launch a full-size glider into the air, thousands of feet up above the runway, with a trailer-based giant engine that has a giant reel of thousands of feet of rope, and it pulls it in really quickly and it launches us up so we don't have to follow behind an airplane. So Dan and I worked on this, and during that process, kind of daydreaming, hey, it'd be fun if we were to take this on a safari someday. And early this year, I contacted Dan and said, Dan, hey, you want to go on a soaring safari for a couple weeks? And Dan's so cool. He's just like, okay. And so it was just the 2 of us with 4 ground crew and a couple of RVs. and we decided to do a 2-week soaring safari, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, that is awesome. I mean, most people probably, if they heard the term soaring safari, they thought, people go and with their motor gliders, because I think that's the most convenient way to do it. Or, some people take a tow plane and a tow pilot. But I'm not sure if anyone has ever done this with a winch. so I'm really, I'm really excited to hear about how that all worked. So
yeah, so let's just give a little bit more description. So really quickly, it was about an 1,800-mile loop across these 5 states, and we'll talk about the legs. But our goal here was we were going to launch from each location and then soar to the next, and then launch from the next one with the winch. And so, that was the goal, and we accomplished it quite a bit. There were a couple of little snags and anomalies that we'll talk about, but it was mainly, soar from place to place and then have the ground crew meet up with us and do it again the next day.
Right. So it's basically going from one place to the next place and then launch there the next day and try and get to the next place and so forth.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of reception did you get with the winch when you turned up at these airports? I mean, I'm sure that some of these airport managers, they've probably never seen a winch before. They probably didn't even know what it was.
What do you think, Dan?
I think they were very receptive. They were very interested. We had every place we went, somebody came out to watch us launch. So it was, they were interested in it. We had no problems with any of the locations to let us launch with the glider.
That is great. Did people feel this was a disruption to them at all, or how did they announce it to other pilots, to other traffic? I mean, did you have to close the runway, or to set the winch up, or how did that work?
So I'll let Dan answer part of that, but let me just say I did my homework beforehand. And even though we ended up landing at a couple of airports we were not planning on flying at, I had contacted all the airport managers way before, months in advance, and they sent them videos, explained our process, and they were all excited for us to come. And there were multiple airports that we never ended up visiting because we just flew past them to make up time. And so just a real valid reception. And then one last thing with that is you said when we arrived, nobody saw us when we arrived, Dan, right? Because we were arriving between 10 o'clock at night and midnight, the caravan. Dan and I had landed hours before, but nobody saw the caravan arrive to the airport because it was so late at night. So.
Wow. So who was doing the caravanning? I mean, who was your crew?
That was mostly Bruno set up the whole crew. It was his sister, his nephew, his son, and his son's friend.
Wow. And so they were all willing participants in this. That's awesome. I mean, you can't do this on your own. So how many you had 2 RVs, right? And then what else did you slug around?
Go for it, Dan.
We had Bruno had an RV and he towed one of the glider trailers. Bruno's truck towed the winch. My truck towed a 5th-wheel camper, and an SUV towed the other glider trailer. Wow!
So you had both trailers with you in case of a land out, yeah?
Yeah, we're crazy, but we're not stupid. We're going to bring trailers just in case.
Yeah. So you basically had but you could have the trailers behind. One was behind the RV, and the other one was behind the winch. So you only had 2.
No, one was behind an SUV and one was behind the motorhome.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Well, it's quite a logistical undertaking. So, how long have you been planning this?
I've been daydreaming about it for a couple of years, but I started getting serious last year when I decided not to host the 2022 Nephi event, and because I wanted to do this instead.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Sorry we didn't have the event, but I needed to do the safari.
No, I get it. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the flying itself. So some of these airports, I think we'll get to that, but they were in the middle of wide valleys, and in the morning you can have morning inversion. So with the winch, you can only get so high up into the air, right? How high could you launch? And was that ever a problem, launching out in the morning with the winch and getting away?
We launched when we figured there was going to be some lift in the area. Logan was the only one we didn't winch out of, and Logan is notorious for having kind of weak lift in the morning, and we had to get underway, so we took an arrow tow at Logan.
Okay. And then how much of that route was actually planned? So we'll get into the route itself, but how much of that route was planned and how much was left to chance?
I don't answer that, Bruno.
Well, we planned it every day, but every day didn't go as we planned. So, all right. So, does June the 18th is a Saturday, and our goal was to get started from Nephi and fly to Logan on that day.
Okay.
And so we get there, and the winds are blowing 30 plus knots, gusting over 40 knots. So we couldn't start that day. The next day, the winds were still.
So this was in Nephi, right? So
this is in Nephi, yeah. So
Nephi,
we're all excited. We get the whole crew there and can't fly. The winds are horrible. The next day, the winds are a little bit better, but not good enough. So we didn't actually start on our adventure until Monday, and due to various circumstances, we launched pretty darn late. And Dan and I barely made it to Morgan, which was not so. Our very first leg, were on the third day instead of the first day, and we go to the wrong airport because we started so late. We barely got there. Dan, you cleared the ridge to get to Morgan by how many feet?
I don't know, 50 or 100 feet.
Yep. Don't tell your wife.
Oh my goodness! Where is Morgan?
I could have bailed off. I didn't have to go over the ridge, but I had enough altitude to get over the ridge. There was no ridge lift working, which is thermals, and so there was no turbulence on the other side of the ridge. So I wasn't worried about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Our third day there was no wind, and so that was actually a problem.
Is Morgan is that between Nephi and Logan?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah. It's south of Logan, and
south of Logan. Okay.
So here we are now at this airport, which we have lots of friends at, but we weren't planning on launching from there. And it has a relatively short runway of 4,000 feet. And our winch, we try to take 6,000 foot, launches that can get us. And you asked this question, we were getting anywhere from, depending on the conditions, 11 to 1,200 feet up to 1,800 feet in elevation. And, it's right above the runway, and we now have to catch a thermal or come back down and land and try again.
So the cable on the winch was 6,000 feet long?
Correct.
Wow. And so how if you have a 6,000 foot runway, how high can you get?
Well, we accomplished 1,800 feet, and most of the time we were not launching into a stiff wind at all. It seemed like it was more crosswind or tailwind.
Right.
So, again, about 15 to 1,800 feet.
Yeah, well, that gives you at least a few minutes to look around and see if you can connect. Yeah, that's great. So you didn't launch from Morgan? Did you move?
No. So we then did launch from Morgan, and
you did launch from Morgan. Okay.
Yeah, and that was in and of itself a feat because it was a very light wind day and not very much activity, and so we actually then were only able to get to Logan then on that fourth day. And here we are at the end of 4 days, and we're like, wait a second, we're supposed to get here on the first day. So we started this trip way behind schedule.
Right. And so how far is it from Nephi to Logan? It's only like what, 200, 300K or so?
It's a little bit over 300K.
A little over 300. Yeah. Yeah, so, but it's basically
so
you're 4 days in, and you basically at 300K.
and Dan flies primarily out of Logan a lot, and so it's like here we are. We made it to Dan's home field. It didn't feel like we had started our adventure yet. So let me just preface though something. The planning on this was not that we were going to be doing 500, 750,000 K flights. The goal was to get around the course.
Sure.
Safely.
Yep.
So, these are small legs, but what we then ended up finding out is to make up time, we ended up having to fly multiple legs in a given day.
Right. Yeah. And it also, you're basically completely dependent on the weather conditions that you have. This is not like you're going to pick your best days of the year and you go fly for a big flight. You basically have to work with what you got. So that's hard, especially if you have to launch with a winch.
But that's the adventure.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds exciting. So when the next day you went the next day took you from Logan. Where did you go from Logan?
Logan.
You went from Logan to Logan.
Yep.
All right. So how did that go? What happened?
didn't go. Dan?
It did. We just didn't have good enough conditions to get up on top of the ridge to be able to even make it to the next airport.
Wow. So you launched from Logan and you couldn't even connect. So you basically had to come back.
With a high arrow tow, we couldn't get up, couldn't get out.
Wow. Yeah.
It was just very stable conditions. It wasn't a soaring day, but
Yeah.
we were
Sure.
trying.
Yep. Sure.
So we went mountain biking instead.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. And you had your mountain bikes at home, right? So that wasn't you didn't, or did you slug the mountain bikes around too?
Brought them around with me.
That's awesome.
Multiple days with mountain bikes and hiking and other things that we couldn't do when we couldn't soar.
Yeah, well, that's a great use of the time. Yeah, awesome. Okay, and then I think the next day was better, right?
Yes.
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay, so what happened?
You want to give this one, Dan?
Now go ahead.
All right, so we finally take off, and the ridge is working. The sky is beautiful, and our minimum requirement was to get to at least Afton, Wyoming. And Afton's a beautiful place. It's right there on the Salt River Range, which if you fly out of Logan, you fly up there, and it's gorgeous. And I've got some fun video of it. And that then can take you all the way up to the Tetons and Jackson Hole.
Mhm.
So we thought we want to at least get to Afton, and it was a good enough day that we then continued on. Dan and I agreed in flight that, hey, we can make it to Pinedale. And so we told the crew, we're trying for Afton, but if you get a specific spot text message from me, that means that we're going to the next airport.
Mhm.
So I was able to communicate both by phone and also by spot specific messages to my sister, who was the head of the ground crew. So she knew what our status was.
Mhm.
Are we not able to make it and heading back to the airport? So the day that we weren't able to make it to out of Logan, they were actually on the road going to the next spot. I was able to contact her.
They were already on the way to Afton.
Yeah, come back. We're losers.
Yeah.
We can't connect. So anyway, we got to Pinedale, and what a gorgeous area. It's right there on the Wind River Mountains. And we were greeted right there at the airport, which this is going to be an ongoing little, thing for us. But we were greeted by a new friend. So Dan, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was, Nathan met us there. He's actually joined our club down here in Utah to come down here and fly gliders. But he has a Rans S7. He gave us rides in it. He let us camp in his front yard with a whole caravan of vehicles. It was great. We went hiking with him and his family. So it was a fun adventure.
Yeah, that is awesome. So he lives in Pinedale.
He lives in Pinedale. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I heard that Pinedale is a fantastic soaring location. If you could.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, right on the Wind Rivers. I think the Wind River Range isn't it kind of one of the most remote mountain ranges in the lower 48? It seems so awfully far away from anything.
It is spectacular, and we've got plenty of video and stuff to share coming up about that. But just gorgeous. By the way, the manager, just to show you how friendly everybody was, the manager of the FBO, he said, please spread the word. Pinedale, we want gliders to come. We used to have gliders here years and years ago, and we love you guys. Come back. And big airport with very few jets coming in and out, and beautiful soaring location. So anyway, plan on going to Pinedale.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. Awesome. So, and the soaring from Logan to Pinedale, that was a pretty good day.
It was a fair day. It could have been better, but it could have been worse too. Judging by our previous flights. But yeah, we had a good flight.
Yeah, good.
Not too stressful. Not a lot of landable, but not terribly stressful.
Right, but then the next day, that is over an area that I'm always afraid of. Just even looking at it on the map.
Yeah, stressful.
Yeah, Pinedale across the Great Basin. So I want to hear about that story, because I was flying up to Rawlins, and then west of Rawlins, I flew up to Wamsutta, and this is just terrifying terrain. So tell me more about that flight from Pinedale to the south, and where did you want to go, and where did you end up?
Yeah. Hey, Dan, you want to go fly over terrifying places for 2 weeks? Okay.
We wanted to make it to Rawlins.
Well, we're actually trying to make it to Saratoga.
That's right. We were going to Saratoga first.
Yeah.
That's right.
Rawlins was a disappointment.
Yeah,
So the weather that day was really, really fickle, and it required a little bit of a later launch, which then made it difficult for us as we were trying to get to our end destination. And we could not make a straight shot across because straight from Pinedale to Saratoga, that whole middle section was just dead air and blue, it predicted. And unfortunately for us, this is over. I mean, there's not even farm fields. So, I mean,
there's nothing. There's absolutely
no,
nothing.
there's I-80. So it's like, you can land in front of the truckers, on the freeway.
Yeah, but I mean, if you even have to get to I-80 first. It's quite a distance from Pinedale to I-80, isn't it?
Oh, it was exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other problem with the forecast is that the top of the lift was maybe 13 to 14,000 feet.
Oh,
And
geez.
that is not high there.
No,
And so,
not at all.
Dan and I, this was day, we should have kept track, day 6. And I mean, we were feeling the pressure of, we're way behind now. We're 5 days behind and we got to make it. And, let's see if we can do it and try not to get on the news. And so we headed, due south. And there are a couple of farming communities about 50 miles south of Pinedale. And one of their fields was going to be our bailout. And then even further south by about another 40 miles, there is, a regional airport that has, small commuter jet service out of that. And that was our only bailout. So we basically got to within visual, distance of I-80. And then we started heading east as the day was dying. And I'll let you take it from there, Dan.
We kind of hopscotched ahead of each other back and forth. Somebody would find a lift and go up, and then somebody else would find a lift and go up. I think my low point was, I don't know, about 10,000 feet, which is
Scary.
It's
That's scary low, yeah. I mean, what's the terrain there is around 6,000 or so, I think.
Somewhere around there, 6,000 or 7,000.
Yeah, 6,000 or 7,000, yeah.
Yeah, we could see the traffic on the freeway down there. But there was lift, and we'd find it and climb back up and keep on going. But it is scary when you have nothing good to land on below you.
I mean, I flew there at 16,000, and I was uncomfortable being at 16,000 feet. So I can't imagine what it's like to be at 10,000 feet. That's pretty intimidating.
The things you do when you have a goal, right?
Yeah. Okay, so you got to I-80, and from I-80, you tried to get to Saratoga. When did you decide you had to divert?
When we couldn't climb anymore.
And we had final glide made into Rawlins, so we just headed in there. It was kind of late in the day,
and windy.
And it was windy.
Windy. It's always windy there.
The wind had come from the west, which was helping us, but when we came into Rawlins, it was coming from the east, and so we had a headwind coming in to land.
Yeah, that is unusual to have a easterly wind there. It's usually blowing hard out of the west.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's amazing. So because you had a headwind, I mean, basically because you were going east, that's why you had an easterly wind. Normally, you would have had a tailwind.
Always going the wrong way.
And
Saratoga is not that far from Rawlins, so we just barely didn't make our goal. And,
yeah, I know it's not that far. It's just Saratoga is a nicer place.
Spent the night in a Walmart parking lot, which was a first and a last for us. We're like, we're not going to do that again. What was funny is we were actually captive. We weren't even allowed. We couldn't even get out of the airport. The gate was closed, and since we're not in a vehicle, we couldn't drive out of that. And we called the airport manager after hours, and he can we go into the FBO? And he said, well, I'd have to come out, and no. And so we were basically stuck till our crew got there to let us out of the gate. It was
wow.
Rawlins is an interesting place, but. The next day, the airport manager ended up being a lot nicer, but we had not planned on landing there. So he, we were surprised,
sure, he was taken by surprise. Yeah.
But at the end, he was watching us launch and had a kick out of it. So it was the next day.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's get to the next day then. So you basically spent the night in the parking lot at the Walmart. That's where the breakfast was probably too. Doesn't sound too exciting. So I'm sure you were excited to get out of Rollins.
Yeah, and we so we launch out of Rollins, and let's see, we had some rope breaks, didn't we, Dan?
You had a rope break. I did not have a rope break.
Okay, yeah, Dan's the stud. I'm the loser. So, I mean, during some of this time, we are starting to encounter some issues with the rope, which gets worse and worse progressively throughout this thing.
Uh-huh.
But so we launch, and our goal is to Granby, and this was a monsoonal day, which it showed that there were going to be thunderstorms and things over Granby, but we thought maybe we can just sneak in and just go through the side and get lift and get in, and we at least got past Saratoga, and that felt good. And then as we were getting into the Walden Valley, in front of us, it was really stormy over in Granby area, and in fact, it was pretty nasty rain storm over the Walden Airport when we first got into that valley. And I'll let you continue, Dan.
We'd headed for the snow-capped mountains that were south of Rollins, and Bruno took a little path a little bit east of where I was, and I got high enough lift that I could have made it into Granby. I had final glide made on that, but Bruno couldn't get back up into the lift band, and it was dying. So we just headed into Walden and landed there. And there was nobody there. It was absolutely empty airport.
Yeah,
and luckily it had stopped raining, so we were.
It looks pretty. It looks like a really remote sort of western town. I have not seen it on the ground. I just know it from the air. It looks really nice, but I don't know how was it in Walden?
It was beautiful.
The town. There's two hangars there, and couldn't see a single airplane. There may have been some in the hangars, but there was nobody there till the next morning. And then 3 people flew in just to say hi to us, following us on Facebook.
Oh, that is cool. So who was that? And so they came with their airplanes?
Yes.
Yeah. Where did they come from?
Do you remember all the people there? One of the guys we found the ID tag. Remember that?
Yeah. And he was a government guy, but he had taught soaring 30 years ago. So he thought it was interesting to come in and see us.
Oh, that is very nice. So this is really cool. So people would basically, they follow you on Facebook, they see your journey, they get in their airplane, and they say, just to say hi, they come to a different airport and, join you for breakfast or so.
Yeah. So we had somebody come from the Front Range, somebody come from Steamboat Springs, and the other, and it was fantastic. It was fun to feel that support. So
yeah, that is great.
One of my friends here, Ron Gleason, he texted me when he found out that we had landed at Walden, and he said that back in, I think, the 80s, we're not the first ones to winch out of Walden. They were winching hang gliders out of Walden Airport.
Yeah.
So anyway, beautiful little area, but that was our spot for the night.
Yeah. No, it's a great little place, and I know the area well, but. And I was glad you guys didn't try to get into Granby that night. The weather looked really awful.
Yeah, it did.
Wings and Wheels has been serving the soaring and sport aviation community for over 30 years. They hands down have the largest and most comprehensive inventory of sailplane and soaring supplies in North America, and they ship globally. Nearly everything you'll find on their site is in stock and ready for same-day shipping. Wings and Wheels is the exclusive American representative for HPH sailplanes. Be sure to check out the Twin Shark, their latest launch. They're also now the exclusive distributor in North America for the new Just Soaring Glider Sim Pro. The team has thousands of hours of flying experience in gliders and airplanes. Staffed by Adam, Kelly, Julie, and Sean. A friendly voice will answer when you call or email them. Check them out at wingsandwheels.com.
Okay, so then next day out of Walden. Walden can be tricky to in the mornings. It can be very inverted. I know sometimes you can't really fly there until like 2 or 3 p.m. In the afternoon. So was that your experience, or was it easier to get out of Walden?
We launched a little earlier than that. I think it was 12:30 or 1 when we launched, wasn't it, Bruno?
Yeah, so we were trying to launch as early as possible, but we knew it was going to start a little bit later. So we picked the timing about right.
Yeah, good. Because I was flying that day as you took off from Walden. I was maybe about 50 miles east of you, heading north. And the reason I was heading north is because I was looking to the south, and there was these huge clouds that were building up over the Gore Range, and then over in the area around Aspen, and then towards Salida. So and I knew that's where you guys were heading. So I was like, hopefully everything is going well. So tell me about the next day, because that day I just seemed to be another super exciting adventure. the way I would imagine it.
Yeah. So again, a shout out again to Steve and to Bill, our two friends who came and visited us from Steamboat and from the Front Range. So we launch, and this was, if you were to look at the path and the distance that we did, I guess this is one of our more impressive legs. And the goal was we're trying to get to Creed. So we were trying to bypass a couple of steps. We were initially planning on, going to Granby, and then from Granby to Salida, and then so from Salida to Creed. And we're like, hey, we're just going to go straight from Walden to Creed. And we looked at the weather, and it seemed like it was possible, but it was going to be tricky because of overdevelopment. And let me just stop by saying, with all sincerity, Utah are the foothills of the Colorado Rockies. You guys have big mountains.
We have big mountains, and this
oh my goodness,
by the biggest mountains, some of the biggest mountains, actually the biggest mountains.
Yeah.
You were flying over the Sawatch Range, and that's where Mount Elbert is. Mount Elbert is the second highest peak in the lower 48, just a little lower than Mount Whitney, just by a few feet.
Unbelievable. So you guys have big mountains and not big farms. There's like not farm fields in between all the valleys like we're used to in Utah. It was intimidating.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you didn't pick the best weather. I know that the cloud bases weren't super high either that day.
We didn't pick the weather, but we're on a safari. We got to keep going, because the future weather forecast was we could be stuck and done. And that's what actually in every single leg we were looking at it, and it seemed like we just lucked out of barely getting good enough weather for the next day to keep moving. And it just seemed like one lucky coincidence weather-wise after another. Wouldn't you say, Dan?
Yeah, if we'd gotten stuck on several different places, we would have been there for 3 or 4 days before the weather turned around to let us get out again.
And we probably would have had mutiny with the crew.
Talk a little bit more about that flight, because you went from Walden, then you basically flew south. You crossed the mountain range to the south that's called the Bears Ears Range, and you get to Kremling. You have the Kremling Airport,
yes.
And then you have a big step between Kremling and Leadville. And
so before Kremling, there was this big blue hole that we had to fly through. Right. And so to the west of Kremling on the foothills, we saw some clouds. And so, we were high enough. We said, hey, let's just fly through this dead air to go west of Kremling. And then when we got over those foothills, those clouds weren't working very well. And so it took a little bit of a struggle to get up. And then once we got high enough, we just kept heading south. And ignorance is bliss. We probably didn't know how big and scary the areas that we were flying over, but
I mean, this is probably one of the most intimidating stretches in Colorado. I don't like to fly over that area unless I can get, to about 17,000 feet. And I feel comfortable that I can keep airports in glide. But if I can't be at 17,000 feet, I can't keep an airport in glide. And there really aren't any places where you can land. I mean, there's kind of there's the Dillon Reservoir in the worst case, right? You ditch the glider in the lake. And then there is, south of Dillon, there's the Breckenridge Golf Club. I think you would be super a super exciting feature of the Breckenridge Golf Club, but the fairways are not suited for landing really. So this is a pretty tough area to fly over.
And cloud base that day was 15.5. And so we're flying this, and we just had to keep reminding ourselves, hey, we're doing this for fun.
Yeah, wow.
But it was exciting. We made it.
Right? There was lift because there was a lot of development. Did you get any thunderstorms or anything?
Not there.
Well, we had west of Salida,
yeah. We didn't fly through any thunderstorm areas other than coming into Page.
Okay, yeah. So you were, but you made it to Creed, and Creed isn't easy to get to either. I mean, it's in the La Garita Mountains, just east of the San Juans, and it's another pretty intimidating area.
And a couple of things that was interesting is that we passed through 3 or 4 different weather systems, and you would suddenly have clouds 2,000 to 3,000 feet lower than the other clouds that you're in.
Right.
And I mean, just all of a sudden, it's just the clouds just a line, a wall of just lower clouds.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah. But we didn't know if those lower clouds would even have lift. And luckily they did. But the other challenge is with Creed is from the north of Creed, you've got a 14,000er. So we had to be high enough for final glide to get over the 14,000 foot peak to get into the Creed Valley. Right. So, I mean, we basically had to stay high and soar all the way till we were almost on top of Creed.
Yeah, you absolutely have to. I mean, there's the only airport to the north is Gunnison, and that gets pretty far away if you're only at those altitudes.
That was our only out. Yeah, so we kept Gunnison as
there are some farm fields there, but they're really.
I don't think so anymore.
Yeah,
we didn't see
them. There are some, but very few, and you have to know where they are, otherwise you won't find them. It's another very intimidating area. How was Creed?
Well, Dan, tell him what the atmospheric conditions were like when we got to Creed. I mean, it was Disneyland.
But we flew past Creed about 15 miles because our crew was 4 hours behind us, I think is what it was, because it went almost the whole length of Colorado. And so they were going to be really late. So we decided to fly south just to play around. We were still planning on landing at Creed. But about 15, 20 miles south of Creed, there was a wall of clouds that went from the ground up to 30,000 feet. It wasn't a thunderstorm. It was just a wall of white clouds.
White, puffy beautifulness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't know what was causing it, but it was beautiful.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's overdevelopment over the San Juans that starts early, and then some clouds get really high, and then they drift over the San Luis Valley. You didn't have to go that way, but there's often very high buildup there. But it wasn't thunderstormy. That's interesting.
No.
So we landed Creed, and immediately a guy from the RV community that was staying in Creed for the summer comes up, and he was, of course, our ride into town, and we had great pizza there, and they showed us around the mines, and we enjoyed Creed. I mean, Creed's a kind of a cool little tourist destination where people like to go. So something about Creed that both Dan and I noticed from the air, it looked like a brown, uninteresting. It's like, why would anybody want to be there? But tell them what it's like on the ground.
It's beautiful. When from 14,000 feet or 15,000, we came across the ridge. It looks like this little tiny valley, but when you actually land in there, it's a huge valley.
It's a wide valley, yeah.
It's beautiful from the ground.
River running through there, and it was beautiful. That's why it's popular for the tourists.
All right, so we spend the night in Creed, and luckily Creed had a little FBO house hut, log cabin actually, that we could then stay inside, waiting for the crew and out of the way of the bugs. And then the Creed was by far the most difficult place to launch out of.
Before we took into that, tell them about the tire and the rock on the winch.
Oh yeah. My son, bless his heart. So part of this whole thing of making it is that your ground crew, they all make it and they all don't have problems or accidents or things like this. So about 20 miles out of Creed, this is now, we're talking 11 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night. We have a caravan of 4 vehicles coming up the canyon and its twisty, windy roads. And my son was driving my Ford 150, pulling the winch too close behind the next vehicle. And all of a sudden they're all swerving because there's rocks in the road. And my son swerves and the winch trailer tire hits the rock and it explodes. And luckily my son was able to stay on the road and, didn't go off the road or roll and go into the river or anything. And so we now have a winch that has a no tire and, just a destroyed rim. Luckily, and thank goodness for the Utah Soaring members that decided to do this, we did have a spare winch tire. And so we were able to the next morning go back to the side of the road and get it fixed, which, by the way, Dan kind of headed that up, and we actually changed another tire for one of the vehicles that day. So, 2 flat tires in the day, but we were very lucky that, he didn't go off the road and, roll. So
that was a late night.
Yeah, it was a late night.
So, but you left the trailer at the road until the next morning, or you?
Yeah, it was.
We pulled it off in a white spot of the road, so it was out of traffic.
Okay, and then you went back the next day to fix it.
Yes.
So that was another late launch then out of Creed.
Well,
launch is.
Launches. I wanted to ask how many launches on average did it take to get away with the winch?
Normally 1 per person, but Creed was the exception.
Okay.
It took each 4 launches.
Yeah. So Creed is close to 9,000 foot elevation. And with density altitude, even though it's kind of cool, it's not sea level cool. It was actually
no. You're talking 11,000 feet.
Yes.
Density altitude.
So we were dealing with 11,000 feet density altitude, no wind, except for like thermals that would blow through, and we kept having the bad luck of there being a little bit of even a tailwind, and it was really sketchy. Dan, you want to describe some of your launches?
We could not get the winch has a certain speed range. It's, I don't know what it is. 60.
It's locked in 3rd gear. Yeah.
Locked in 3rd gear. And so even when you're revved up as high as it'll go, it will only pull so fast. But at that density altitude, that was barely above our stall speed on the gliders. And so we could not get going fast enough to rotate into the climb portion of the flight unless we had a little bit of headwind. And so we swapped ends of the runway twice, I think it is, trying to get the prevailing winds, and finally gave up and just went with waited for a thermal to come the correct direction to launch into the wind to be able to get out of there. But each of us took 4 launches before we finally got up.
Wow.
So it was my turn to try to launch. And so I finally did get up on the 4th one. And then because of having to switch location stuff, I mean, Dan was a couple of hours behind me. And what was miraculous about this is that, again, the weather forecast was that we were supposed to launch between 11 and noon, and after noon it was just going to overdevelop, and we're trying to get through unlandable stuff between Creed and Blanding, Utah, and that is actually the most scary of all.
These are the San Juan Mountains. This is the widest mountain range there is. Colorado. These are
there's not even dirt roads. I mean, there's nothing.
It's super intimidating. Yeah, there's nothing. I mean, there are some dirt roads in some valleys, but if you get into that valley, you cannot land anywhere.
Yeah.
There's no place to land.
And again, we had weather forecasts of bases, cloud bases in the. Do you remember, Dan? Was it like 15,000?
Something like that, but there was
low bases. And it's supposed to overdevelop and then, get all shady. And we're trying to get through this. So anyway, the point I wanted to make is that, Dan's last launch was, I think, was it starting to rain on the ground when you launched, or just barely right after?
Just 5 minutes after I launched, they said it just poured rain.
And he actually climbed in kind of the rain right before it shut down. So, and the next 3 days were predicted to just be, monsoonal and not even flyable. And that would have, had we not been able to have Dan get up that last flight, we wouldn't have had enough time to do it again. And we would have just trailered home because it would have been impossible. So And then, we fly, and you'll see this in videos and stuff. But again, you've got these multi-layered clouds of, mountain obscuration, clouds all the way down into the mountains and valleys. And what was funny is, thank goodness we were naive. I had Telluride as a bailout. I didn't understand that Telluride is on the western edge of these mountains.
Exactly.
There was no way we would ever have gotten to Telluride because of all the mountain peaks. But I had a 30-to-1 glide ratio on my computer.
That doesn't do anything.
Ignorance is bliss. So once we finally got to the western edge, more towards, what is it? We had Telluride to the north, and what was our airport to the south?
Durango is in the south. And then you have Monticello, but that's further out already. So you have basically, as you get out from Crete, first you have Stevens in the south, but that is more behind you already. And then you have Durango. It's the only other. Durango, and Animas it's another airport also in Durango.
Yeah.
Animas.
Yeah. So and then we then have, we're trying to get to Blanding, and I got a little bit ahead of Dan, and it seemed like it was really easy. And by the way, this whole time we had, where you slit your palms and you do the blood brother oath of, hey, if you go down, I'm going to go down with you in the field. And that time I'm like, hey, we're doing great. See ya. And so I just went and landed Blanding. And then what was your experience?
An hour and a half later, I mean, the cloud street was great for him, and it kept on dying right in front of me. And I was trying to get this weak lift. I'm taking half knot, 1 knot, 2 knot thermals, trying to get up to get across that ground. But there were landable fields there. It wasn't like coming across the mountains, so I wasn't as nervous there.
Yeah. Cortez was the airport to the south.
Cortez, yeah, okay, but that's also pretty. You basically, when you get to Cortez, you have the big stuff behind you.
Oh yeah,
the big stuff was all before.
Oh yeah. So it was easy for me to get to Blanding, and Dan, he
I struggled.
He had some fun. So what was kind of, I mean, looking back on this, is that there were certain legs where Dan struggled, and there were certain legs that I struggled. For example, again, I mean, we couldn't get to Granby because I went out in the valley and I couldn't find any lift anymore. But ultimately, it all played out just fine. So anyway, got to Blanding, and we met a new friend in Blanding who has a motor glider there, and he's a retired gentleman, and he's passionate about soaring, and we had fun then flying with him on the next day. So, and the FBO and everybody were fantastic, and Blanding was an anticipated airport, so they were excited and waiting for us. In fact, the whole town came out to watch us winch launch the next day.
That sounds great. Yeah.
So you want to tell them about the next day, Dan?
The next day, we were heading for Colorado City in Arizona, but we got late launch. I think was that the one we both took 2 launches?
Well, we kept having rope breaks.
So you had a rope break on that one. That's right. You had the rope break. So I got
multiple.
Yep. Yeah. I didn't have a rope break. I'm trying to remember if I had 2 launches on that. I don't remember now.
I think you did. You did. Just because you just couldn't find the thermal, and then on your second one. But I, unfortunately, I didn't. I wasn't able to get away until my 4th launch because I had 3 rope breaks.
So where did the rope break? Is this a rope or is it a cable? And where did it break?
It's a rope, 6,000 pounds strength, and it was breaking at our splices. But at the beginning of the splice, where it seems like there's some sort of wear damage or shock damage, we're still trying to figure out what was causing that, because the splices stayed good. So it's not like the splices were coming undone. But so basically we're still trying to figure it out, but we were starting to now have, rope breaks, and that's then making it very difficult. It doesn't take that long to fix the rope break. But you then have to reposition everything, pull everything out again. And so it's very disruptive.
Yeah, but from a flying standpoint, these rope breaks were all benign. I mean, what happens here? What altitude would the rope break, and then did you just land straight ahead, or
all the above? It depended on the altitude.
Okay.
So, but we didn't crash and die, and we didn't damage our gliders on these. We've been trained, and with winching, you're trained on rope breaks, and
sure,
I remember we handled them well.
When I did my only rope break I ever had in my soaring career was on my second solo winch launch.
Wow. Yeah.
at about 100 feet.
Okay. Yep. That's
Which is
legit.
probably about the worst possible
Put the
altitude
nose
to be.
down and land straight ahead. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we finally get up and we're trying to get to Colorado City, and we're thinking the weather that day was predicted to be good, except for near the south end of Lake Powell, which is Page, Arizona. And there's supposed to be a big blow up there, but if we could get out fast enough, we could get past it and easily get to Colorado City. I mean, again, this is like a 320K flight, not a big deal, but
But the terrain is
but
also
unlandable.
super intimidating. Yeah.
So-
I mean, I know the Lake Powell. So for anyone who's listening, I mean, for the people who are, especially the people around the world, I mean, who haven't been to Lake Powell, I mean, what's 2,000 miles of shoreline, and it's surrounded by slot canyons. It's kind of the Grand Canyon, a little upstream and a little lower, but these canyons are like, they're like crevasses on a glacier. So if you fall into one of those crevasses or slot canyons, nobody will ever find you again.
And because of those, you don't have dirt roads there all over the place, because you just have all these finger canyons. And so it was from Blanding to Page was, take a look on a map. There is a lot of unlandable scariness. And Dan, I'll let you talk about this one.
Since I launched first, I started heading out first to try to find the lift, and so there was a cloud streak going to the west before it started heading south. So I took that one because it went towards Cal Black Airport. There's a strip out there on the plateau, and so I headed out that way. And Bruno took off a little later because of the rope breaks, and he took the southern route, and that was actually the better route because my cloud streak ended just about the time I need to cross the unlandable stuff. And so I took a bunch of very weak lift to finally get up high enough to fly over 30 miles of unlandable stuff to get to Navajo Mountain, where Bruno had already made it. And there was a dirt strip over there. I never saw the strip.
Yeah, a dirt strip, but bushes on the side of it. And again, we have 50-foot wide wings, so not optimal to go land there.
But there was
there's a lot of these dirt strips that are just too narrow for gliders. They're built for.
It's a good place to go crash.
Yeah, for backcountry.
Navajo Mountain was still in the sun though, and so we headed there, and we got up to about 15,000, I think is what it was, up there before we headed to Page. But we immediately went underneath the overdevelopment, and for 40 miles of absolutely nothing to land on. We just had nothing. There was nothing there to land on. If you landed there, if you survived it, they would have to helicopter you and the pieces of your glider out because there's no way.
Yeah, if they find you.
Yeah.
I'm just grateful my wife will never listen to this podcast. So we can keep talking about this. She's never going to hear this.
And then we were coming into Page, and they had pretty much the operations had shut down at Page because the thunderstorms come in and had a lot of turbulence and strong winds blowing there, whatever. And Bruno gets
black.
It was black. And so nobody was flying there. And Bruno calls in that, two gliders come into Page. So the guys came out to watch these two idiots come flying in out of the thunderstorm into land at Page.
And I mean, there were strong winds, flying into it. It was, gusting well over 30 as we were coming into land.
Now, our computers said we had plenty of altitude to get there, but it was still unnerving to be able to fly through 40 miles of no lift across.
Yeah, if you have storms, I mean, you can't count on your computer at all. I mean, if you get 10 knots of sync, I mean, forget what the computer says, right?
Yeah. So to me, that was the most intimidating part of the flight, of the entire safari.
I mean, I saw this little video that Bruno put together on Facebook where you just see you guys flying over Lake Powell and all the storm clouds around. It looks amazing.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful and intimidating.
But Page was a real frustrating disappointment, even in the air, because in my mind, I thought there's no way they're going to let us winch launch out of this airport. There's airline service. There's tons of private jets. There's no way they're going to let us do this. So this is a one-way trip to maybe the end of our expedition. And so it was really frustrating to land there. I was grateful that we were safe and okay out of the storm. But, now we have to deal with, we are in a pretty large,
pretty big airport,
major airport. So
Is it a Class D airport, or is it?
There's no tower there.
There's no tower. Okay, it's not towered. Okay.
So the guys that came out to see us, they worked for the FBO, and I did a video with I think his name was Alan.
Tim Allen.
Yeah, his name was either Tim or Alan, because I met two different guys. That one was named Tim, the other Alan. So, became friends with him and talked to him, and he picks up his phone and he calls the airport manager. And he said, hey, he describes what's going on. He's like, hey, will you allow these guys to winch launch out of here tomorrow? And the guy asked him a couple questions, and he looked at me and he says, yeah, I think that they're okay guys. And he said, yes. And I could not believe it. It's like, we are actually going to winch launch out of Page Airport. And Dan, why don't you tell them about how that worked that morning? Because, I mean, we had picked a window and it didn't work out, and it ended up working out perfect for us. So
Yeah, there was an airliner that was scheduled to come in at noon and leave at 12:45, and they were supposed to overdevelop later in that day. But so we were going to try to launch in that 45-minute area there, but it looked like it was going to hold off for a while. So we decided to wait till after the 12:45 departure for the airliner. And while we were waiting, there were 6 or 7 other jets that decided to take off at the same time.
In those 45 minutes, we would have been so in their way.
Yeah, that wouldn't have worked.
They just kept on taking off and off and off, and everybody left. And then once we started launching, there was nobody else on the airport. Nobody came in or launched.
No rope breaks, and we both were able to get off on the first launch. Dan, yours was kind of exciting. Tell them about your launch.
I had a hard time getting up. It was one of my lower saves. Of course, I was right at the end of the runway, and so I thought it was only about 300 feet off the ground. But I looked at my IGC file, and I was about 500 or 600 feet when I finally caught the thermal and went up from there. It was a little scary there, but we finally got up, and we were headed for Nephi. We didn't get that far.
Well, no, we were still headed for Colorado City.
We were going to Colorado City. I thought we were going to Nephi.
No. We were going to Colorado City on that one, and that was the day that we both decided to land out. So okay, so we're going, and it's just going really well. So the cloud bases are fairly high. It's pretty stormy, but working in between the different thunderstorm clouds and things. And just to the east of Kanab, there's this wall or this line of really dark, flat bottom, strong. Clouds that go up to 45,000 feet. So giant thunder cells, but they don't have. We didn't see any lightning, and there's very little rain. And so we go through that, and the lift was unbelievable. I encountered over 3,000 feet a minute lift underneath it. And on the other side of it was then dead air for 40 miles. So it had eaten up everything.
They suck all the air in, yeah.
And we both tried to get through that air, and we both landed out in farm fields north of Kanab. And so that was our only land out.
Did you know that area? Did you know it was
landed? Oh, no. In fact, where I landed, I was the only farm field within 20 miles in any direction.
Okay. But you knew there were farm fields, or you were just going, hopefully there is something.
Well, as I was high enough, I was looking ahead, and I saw the one farm field, and I'm like, okay, I can go into this area. And that's the one I landed in the middle of nowhere. We say that a lot, middle of nowhere, but this whole trip was middle of nowhere.
Well, there's a lot of nowhere in that whole area. Yeah.
So Dan landed out, I landed out, and we both got retrieved successfully. We ended up staying at a very close friend's RV park that he owns in Kanab overnight. And then we launched out of Kanab the next day. And again, we were dealing with some rope break problems. And
how about your experience of trying to get cell coverage after you land?
Yeah, exactly. Isn't there a story about?
There is.
You land in the middle of nowhere, but there's a cell phone. There's a phone.
Okay, so we have spot devices, satellite, and so I activate it so that way my crew knows how to come get me. But I wanted to let them know I was okay, and there was no cell coverage. And the farm field, the farmer wasn't there, even though there were tons of cows and goats and stuff. And I never even met anybody, the farmer. They never met him. So I started walking, to high ground to see if I can get cell coverage. And I walk a couple of miles, and in the middle of nowhere on this dirt road, I did a small video on this, and I'll share it again. But there's all of a sudden this solar powered emergency telephone booth, basically. And I pick it up and 911, how can I help you? I'm like, I'm a pilot that just landed out. I'm okay. I just want you to relay.
What is
in a glider. I just want you to relay to a crew. I'm like, do you even know where I am? And they're like, no, you're just calling us. So long story short, once we got picked up, we had to drive 30 miles of back roads, and there was not another one of those emergency phone things just in the middle of nowhere. So,
that's fascinating.
And then as I get back, the cows are all grouped around my glider, and I'm running. No, pictures of them munching on my glider. So I think we're going to have a Soaring, an SSA magazine center spread of the cows all licking my glider. My canopy was all licked on and stuff. And luckily they didn't start chomping down, but I had to scare them off. And there was a bull.
Wow,
But I was submissive. And
the French call it ovage, right? If you land out, they basically say you go to the cows, and that's basically what you did.
Yep. So went to the cows.
Went to the cows.
Now Dan's a better pilot, so he goes and lands in a beautiful alfalfa field, and
It was rough.
yeah, so we both landed out. Next day we launch out of Kanab. We're struggling, and with the Kanab one, we're just trying to now get back to Nephi, and this is the last day, the 14th day, and if we don't make it, we're gonna just trailer home. Our ground crew needs to go back to life and stuff, and so Dan takes off pretty darn early. He has a rope break on his first launch, but it's high enough that he is able to get away, and we get to pick up the pieces of the rope over the FBO and over the fuel farm and over the, So anyway, we have to. We've got thousands of feet of rope everywhere that we have to wrangle up, and we get it all spliced. And then I kept having rope breaks. Our rope was really struggling at that point. And so Dan, you probably took off at around 2:30, would you say?
Somewhere, I think it was closer to 1:30.
Okay. And, we're struggling. And so I get on the radio and say, Dan, just go, we want you to make it. And unbeknownst to me, he's smart enough to know to backtrack to go close his loop from the day before from landing out. So that way we don't have,
you have a complete track.
We want a complete circle.
Right. Sure.
And so anyway, with all my rope breaks and problems, I did not launch until 4:30. And this is we have a 200 mile, it's 200 miles from Kanab to Nephi. So at 4:30 in the afternoon, I headed 30 miles east in the wrong direction so I can close my circle. And then I headed home, and my last hour, by the way, this entire time we're both flying dry, so no ballast, but my last hour,
Winch and
last hour, my computer said that I was averaging 123 miles an hour. And so I just wanted to get home. So
wow.
So
you did it. So you made it home?
We made it home. In fact, Dan was a gentleman, and he waited for me in the air. And so that way we could both go in and land together.
Ah, that is amazing. I didn't even know you made the last leg too. That's awesome. That is fantastic.
Yeah. So we both did it by the hair of our chinny chin chin. And
on the last day that you had available.
That we could. Yeah. So we had planned that this hopefully would be a 10 or 11 day trip, and it turned into a 14 day trip. And, but we accomplished the circle that we were wanting to.
Yeah, that is fantastic. So it's been, what is it, a week or 2 weeks that you're back?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah. So what's the most memorable piece? I mean, we just talked about all of this, but I think there are a lot of memorable pieces in there.
I think the fear factor over Lake Powell was my most memorable. I do not want to repeat that. It's a little scary to go fly over that kind of terrain.
Yeah. Well, worst case in that scenario, worst case you got a ditch in the water, and
Yeah.
the water is warm and there's sandy shores everywhere. So
There's cliffs.
and a lot of people that can take you, that can help you get out.
Yeah.
Our longtime sponsor of the show, the Soaring Academy, is engaged in nonprofit outreach work with local area veterans and also with young people for the STEM programs at their top-notch glider port facility just outside of Los Angeles, nestled near the north side of the San Gabriel Mountains. They also have a fantastic flight school and are continuing to turn out great glider pilots every month. If you like to donate to their nonprofit initiatives or learn more about their flight school, go to soaringacademy.org or check them out on Instagram at Soaring Academy.
My most, the flying was amazing and we had fun every single day, but the people that we were with, the ground crew and Dan, that's what made it for me.
Ground crew was incredible. I just can't get over it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
And advice to anybody who wants to try something like this, make sure you go with people that you like, because you're going to be, living with them and dealing with problems together, for a big thing like this. But just to show everybody, Dan would never tell anybody this, but just to show everybody what kind of a stud Dan really is. He spent the last 4 years refinishing his glider. He finished days, not weeks, days before this. And he had 2 pattern toes before we started this.
Wow.
So Dan just came back from a hiatus of not flying for 4 years to fly this with me. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. That is really amazing. Because that seems like, I mean, the way you describe it, I mean, I I would have chickened out on that trip several times.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So if I were the interviewer, can I just ask one question to ourselves?
Sure, go ahead.
Because this is kind of a setup. So Dan, would you ever do this again?
I don't think so.
And why?
Just because of the fear factor involved with it. If we had great weather, it would be a fun trip to go around there, but we struggled a lot of the places. And when you're pushing to get ahead, to get to the next place, knowing that the weather's going to turn around, it's not something I want to do again.
Yeah. Minus the fear, on a scale of 1 to 10, what was the fun factor?
The scenery was incredible. I mean, the Lake Powell stuff, the Rocky Mountains, even going across the desert from Pinedale down to Rawlins was incredible. To be able to fly in places that I've never flown before is fun. I enjoy doing that. I just like to have a few more 1,000 feet.
My answer is as well, no. I'm not interested in doing this again. And the reason why is I had fun every single day. And, luckily I was a little bit, more current in the cockpit. So there was a little bit less fear, but I give this a 1 in 10 chance that we could have made it with all of the problems that we had with weather and equipment and logistics. The fact that we made it at all is a minor miracle. And to try doing this again and, only getting 70% of the way around the course or something would be so frustrating. It's the fact that we made it and we had so much fun. I'm good. So both of us had a great time and we satisfied this, and it's amazing that we made it. And so we're just grateful. Is that fair to say, Dan?
Once in a lifetime adventure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I before we did this, I thought, oh, maybe I'll take, 6 or 12 people around next year and do this thing. Impossible to get around the course.
Yeah.
If you have a group, I mean, even if we had 3 people, I don't think we would have gotten around.
No, there's several times that, we just barely got out as it was. We had a third person have to get them out. They couldn't have done it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you were a little unlucky with the weather, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, you really were. I mean, it's unusual to have cloud bases at 15,000 feet when they normally are between 18 and 22.
We'll have to trust you on that.
Yeah, no, really. I mean, they really are very often much higher. But of course, you had the disadvantage of having to basically fly every single day, and my assessment is maybe a little different because I get to pick the days that I fly. right? And so I probably don't fly the days that you I don't fly the days that you fly over the highest mountains and the most scary terrain and the so I totally understand your answer,
But
Dan. I think
but
that
again,
is
what a wonderful, amazing, fun experience that we're both so glad that we did. I mean,
yeah,
very,
super
very
memorable.
glad. I'm glad we made it.
Yeah.
But it was
I mean, if
fun.
anyone else wants to do a soaring safari, looking back at your experience, I mean, what advice would you give them? I mean, were you overly ambitious in the planning, or was it just about right? Or would you suggest maybe the winch isn't the right vehicle, or what advice would you give anybody else who might plan such a thing?
A motor glider would be very useful for a trip like this. There wouldn't be the fear factor involved with that.
Yeah, if you can rely on your motor, and you usually can't.
I would say we planned about as well as we could, and I guess the advice is know that the odds are against you of succeeding.
Yeah.
That's kind of defeatist, but it was amazing we made it, and I'm really glad we did. We wouldn't be if we wouldn't have made that last leg. I wouldn't be doing this interview with you. It's like, yeah, we almost made it. No.
Okay. Well, then let me ask one other question. So, of all the places that you visited a lot of interesting places. Are there places that you would go back to for a soaring camp?
Oh yeah, Dan.
Yeah. Where would you go?
I wouldn't mind doing Pinedale. That was fun. I'd like to fly the Wind Rivers again. I've flown them before, but I'd like to do it again. We were talked about going up to Grand Teton on that leg that we went over from Logan, but the conditions wouldn't allow us to get up there that day, so we didn't go there.
A really cool soaring camp. So instead of a safari where we go to 10 different airports, I would totally, with a winch, by the way, I would totally go to a place for a week. So where would I love to go? Imagine 3 days in Afton, Wyoming, because they're really friendly there and they'd love to have us. And then 4 days in Pinedale. That would be a really cool, with a group of 6 gliders, that could be really fun. And Colorado, I want to go back. It's just so scary.
I really enjoyed Granby. The winch did not work as well as we'd hoped.
You mean Creed or
Creed? I mean, not Granby, in Creed. I really enjoyed that. It was a beautiful place, and the valley was nice. The people were nice. The flying was great.
Go with the tow plane?
Go with the tow plane, or put the thing in overdrive instead of third gear. I don't know, make it go faster.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we would both love to have you. I mean, we would all love to have you in Colorado, of course, whenever you want to come back. And but I think it's super cool to go to these places that I just know from the air. I've never been on the ground, and I'm sure that a lot of very, very cool places. Yeah,
love it. Just want to make sure that we do get out. Thank you one more time to the Utah Soaring Association. The board and everybody has been so encouraging and helpful to make this happen. So Dan and I, we were using a borrowed winch from the club. And so thank you again for allowing us to take it. And we promise we'll fix the broken wheel and we'll fix all the broken rope.
Yeah, well, great. Well, many thanks to both of you for sharing a really epic adventure, and I'm sure this is going to be super interesting to listeners all over the world. So, super cool story. This is one of the coolest areas to fly in the world. The Western US, and to do it in a way where you can go from place to place to place to place and have a different scenery and a different launch point each morning, and work with the weather that you dealt with. And the weather can be very fickle, as you experienced, and especially with each of these mountain ranges are so tall, they tend to separate the air masses, and you have different conditions every single day. So super epic adventure. Thank you so much for sharing the story.
Clemens, thank you for being the guest host. And please be aware, lots of video is coming. It's just going to be weeks and months of editing, but it'll be fun to share the videos of this trip.
Wait. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are super excited about that. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much again for joining this podcast, and I hope we get to hear more exciting stories from you.
Thank you, Dan, for being an amazing flying partner.
You too. And thank your family for being an amazing crew.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Hi everyone, Sergio from Soaring Master here. Today we're going to talk about the last part of a soaring flight, which can greatly affect task performance, the final glide. Final glides start when we have accumulated enough height to make it back home with a single glide. The use of navigation computers to help you determine this exact point is super welcome, but still they can only give you performance estimates based on past data. It's up for the pilot to determine whether the final glide is achievable or not. Final glides can be divided in 3 different types depending on the energy involved. High energy final glides are those performed in the sailplane's yellow arch and limited by the sailplane's maximum speed. Optimum energy final glides are those performed within the sailplane's green arch, up to the speed to fly of 2 knots or 1 meter per second. Final glides performed below this reference, up to the sailplane's maximum glide ratio speed, are considered low energy final glides and must be carefully monitored by the pilot during the glide. High energy final glides can only be executed in calm atmosphere, without turbulence or gusts. Otherwise, the pilot will expose himself to structural damage with critical consequences. On the other hand, low-energy final glides expose the sailplane to controlled flight into terrain collisions. During the glide, with each meter or foot you go downwards, your gliding range to any alternate field reduces. This is very serious because your final glide target is generally a known field or a certified field, so there's no need to assess it. If you just enter in a safe traffic pattern starting 300 meters or 1,000 feet above it, you will be okay. But this doesn't work with outlanding fields, because since they are unprepared fields, we need to check the field for ditches, fences, holes, or any other feature that might increase the risk of outlanding. The height needed to properly inspect the field is of no less than 300 meters or 1,000 feet. And this height does not allow for any field change in case the field proves to be unsuitable for landing. You will be literally committed to the field you choose to alternate to in a final glide. You only have one chance and that's it. As you get lower in the glide, your gliding range to reach any field with 300 meters or 1,000 feet is much reduced, and if not properly managed, you may find yourself below final glide and without any height at all to reach any other field on the way. You will basically have to land on whatever terrain you can find ahead. There are 2 things we can do to avoid getting to this trap. The first is to actively scan for alternatives alongside your gliding path during the final glide. Remember, you have only one alternative to buy, so keep scanning all alternatives along the route. The second thing we can do is to set a decision height to evaluate whether the final glide is still achievable or not. I use a 500 meter or 1,600 feet mark as decision height. At this height, I assess my Mach 0 arrival height towards my destination, which will basically be my arrival height with my sailplane flying at its maximum LRD. If by this decision height my arrival height becomes marginal, I'm boarding the final glide and heading to the nearest outlanding field that I have selected during the final glide. I'll spend these extra 600 feet or 200 meters to reach the field so that I can arrive above it with 1,000 feet or 300 meters for me to perform field inspections and a safe traffic pattern. Mastering the final glide is essential, so always have a plan. Scan alternative outlanding fields and have a decision height. Know what to do beforehand. That's it, guys. I wish you all safe final glides. For more tips, follow me on Instagram at Soaring Master, and stay tuned for the next class of the Soaring Master course. Would you like more information about it? Check my website, soaringmaster.com. See you in the next one, guys.
If you would like to say hi and let us know where you are enjoying the podcast, we would love to hear from you. If you are a glider pilot and want to share your aviation journey, contact us at chuck@soaringthesky.com or send us a message on our website at soaringthesky.com and Chuck will get in touch with you. We hope you join us next time for another soaring adventure here on Soaring the Sky, a Glider Pilots podcast. Soaring the Sky is written and produced by Chuck Fulton, co-producer Mitch Thompson. Original music for the podcast was written and produced by Kim Spangler. Graphic design for the podcast was created by Zachary Fulton. Voiceover work was done by Michelle Perez.